I think, re-released the book, The Mirage of Peace, Understanding the Never-Ending Conflict in the Middle East. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
So the never-ending conflict in the Middle East, we can talk about all kinds of things on the foreign policy front. This book, this is re-released, right? The Mirage of Peace?
Yes, I think it's come out as paperback. That's right.
Okay, all right. So can I, if I can just start us off, and you ought to know, you were there, Time Magazine bureau chief in Jerusalem. Why is this conflict in the Middle East never ending? Why?
Because it's about a whole series of very complex issues, many of them related to religion. And at the heart of it is a dispute between the right of the Jewish people to live again in their original homeland, a right that was vindicated by the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and the refusal of most of the Muslim and the Arab world communities to accept that right, and basically a desire to wipe off the map the State of Israel. And this has been a situation that's started in 1948 and even before, and is with us today.
It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding, and I have a very limited understanding of Islam, just done some reading like a lot of people, but my understanding is that once a parcel of land, once a particular area has been under the control of Islam, in their religious perspective, it can never leave. So the Muslims control the area that is now Israel, and that's an offense to Muslims, isn't it? Because this is a land that has escaped the House of Islam, and so it can never be declared free from that religion. Is that true?
That's correct. Any land conquered at any point in history, or if not conquered, at least in the hands of Muslims through some kind of revolutionary process, is considered indelibly given to the Muslim community as part of the Waqf, W-A-Q-F. And it's interesting that the Muslim religion gives no right for followers of the faith to change their point of view, to become adherents of another religion. And in fact, if you stop being a Muslim, and the only way you can be a Muslim is to have your parents be Muslims, or actually to convert in front of another Muslim, if you leave that religion voluntarily, you become an apostate. And according to Sharia, it's quite legal for Muslims to kill apostates. And in fact, many Muslim countries have a death penalty, including Afghanistan, for anyone who is found to have changed his Muslim religion later in life. And unfortunately, we see that in places like Afghanistan, which we're trying to defend and protect.
So let me get this straight, just for those listening and watching online. According to this view, which is the Orthodox view of Islam, nothing that the State of Israel could ever do in peace talks or diplomatic relations will ever change this view that the Jews are not allowed to own land that once was under Islam. So all this talk about Israel needs to come to the bargaining table and they need to stop the settlements in the West Bank, none of those things really matter, because the view is once that land was under the control of Islam, it must be returned.
Well, that's essentially true. And even though certain Muslim governments and certain Arab movements, for example, the Palestinian Authority, and before that the PLO, have expressed willingness to acknowledge the right of Israel to exist and have sat down, agreed to have negotiations with Israel. In point of fact, any Muslim government that accepted the right of Israel to exist would essentially be committing a sin against Islam. I mean, unfortunately, that is the bottom line.
Talking to David Aikman, Tim Wildman with Ed Battagliano. David, what is your, Ed mentioned the book, your latest, the re-release of The Mirage of Peace, Understanding the Never-Ending Conflict in the Middle East. Folks, if you want to know what's going on in the Middle East, Israel, the Muslims, the whole situation over there, this is an excellent read to help you understand, and from a Christian or biblical viewpoint as well. It's called The Mirage of Peace by our guest David Aikman, former Time Magazine bureau chief, Jerusalem. What is your website, David? What's there?
It's at davidaikman.com, which has a list of all my books and several of my talks. And basically, The Mirage of Peace is a comprehensive story of all of the countries in the Middle East, including not an Arab country, but a Muslim one, namely Iran, which is at the center of another big dispute with the rest of the world at this present point. And I make it clear in my account of the Israeli-Palestinian issue that it's not, of course, correct to say that the Israelis have never done anything wrong or that they've never made mistakes towards the Arabs under their control. But it shows the context of the whole of the Israeli position is seen as invalid by most Muslims who comment on it.
What about, let's talk about what's happening. You know, if you look at Israel, it's the most stable country in the whole Middle East. Israel, by far, the most stable country in the whole Middle East. But what's going on around Israel is fascinating, I guess. I don't mean that in a positive way, but I mean to look at. You have what's going on in Syria, which is just to the northeast of Israel. You have a civil war between who are the forces that are fighting there exactly, David? And some people like Senator John McCain want us to take sides in this thing, and I don't see that as a good idea. But you want to describe what's going on in Syria, because thousands and thousands have died.
Right. There is a civil war in Syria which has gone on for 2 years. That started as an uprising against the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, and the movement got its initial impetus from the Arab Spring, which some people may forget started about 2 or 3 years ago. But the trouble with the civil war in Syria is that the most powerful of the movements opposing Assad are the ones led by Islamists, that is, people who want to change the leftist dictatorship of Assad and replace it with an Islamic dictatorship with Sharia law and everything else imposed. And I think there's great danger in giving arms to any group in this conflict, because we don't know who's going to come out on top. I mean, if the Free Syrian Army were the most prominent and successful of all the anti-Assad forces, then it might be justifiable to give them some assistance. But if those weapons fell into the hands of the Islamists, then what started as a civil war will clearly develop into a regional war between Sunni Muslims and everybody else, Sunni and Shia, Sunni against Christian. I mean, already you had the forces of Hezbollah, the Islamist political group in Lebanon, blatantly interfering in the Syrian civil war by giving assistance to the Assad regime. So there's already a developing regional war in the area, and I don't think we want to make this even worse than it is.
What about Egypt?
Well, Egypt, here's the short version of Egypt. Egypt went through a revolution with the overthrow of Mubarak and a series of elections which were won by the Muslim Brotherhood, by President Morsi. But 1 year after Morsi took office, he had so ravaged the economy and had been so incompetent and had begun to impose a draconian version of Sharia, that is Islamic religious law, on the country, that the majority of Egyptians absolutely revolted. And what you saw happening in those demonstrations, which culminated in the so-called coup against Morsi, was a counter-revolution. This is going on throughout the Middle East. People don't want to live under Islamic religious law.
This is good.
It's very good. Yeah, unfortunately, President Obama can't seem to understand that people who support Sharia are set dead against the interests of the United States. They cannot support the American Constitution. And we've seen in Turkey, in Iran, in Egypt, the massive number of people saying, yeah, we're Muslims, that's okay, but we don't want Islamic Sharia imposed on us by a government. And if you can't see this as an American observer, you're absolutely blind to the reality of what is going on at the grassroots.
One other thing, I wonder if the exposure of people to social media, to the internet, it's international travel now in the Middle East, because at one time I wondered whether or not that the majority of people, as you say, Muslims, wanted to have something different in terms of more freedom, to more liberty, more Western style democracy, because you just wonder, well, if they're committed Muslims, then they want Sharia. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? But Sharia goes against the human spirit. Okay. I think President Bush said, people yearn to be free. They want to live their lives, and I kind of doubted that whole notion at one time. But now I'm beginning to see, well, maybe that's true. Maybe people do, even though they are Muslim, they don't want the oppressive Sharia law to dominate.
Yeah, there's women there who want to go to school.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
want to be able to drive a car.
So
Exactly.
maybe this is going somewhere. Although the fundamentals are not there to have a lasting Western style democracy. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see next 1, 2, 5 years what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, the Islamists are dead against the effect of an American-style constitution which would allow freedom of religious choice.
That's the Muslim Brotherhood, right?
Exactly.
The Islamists.
I mean, I cannot understand how President Obama, an intelligent man, cannot figure out that the enemy of the whole of the United States is the Muslim Brotherhood. And everything they have said in every country where they have come to power, everything they have done, has made it quite clear that they will never allow the freedoms guaranteed by the American Constitution in any area of the world that they control. And it baffles me how Obama could be so favoring the Morsi regime when the military overthrew it, failing to understand that the majority of Egyptians just don't want Sharia. So I don't know what.
Well, can you? This is putting you on the spot, and not just President Obama, but others like him, even John McCain, who seems oblivious to